Hello, everyone. So this is a review of Rome, Chapter 10, Section 2, Government and Society. So this will help you answer the section assessment questions at the end. So this first part is actually going to cover questions 1 and question 4 as we talk about the government. So this is, again, Chapter 10, Section 2 of Rome, Government and Society. If you were there, you have just been elected as a governmental official in Rome. Congratulations. Your duty is to represent the plebeians, or the common people. You hold office for only 1 year, but you have one important power. You can stop laws from being passed, or in other words, you can veto things. Now city leaders are proposing a law that will hurt the plebeians. If you stop this new law, it will hurt your future in politics. If you let it pass, it will hurt the people you are supposed to protect. Will you let the new law pass? Why or why not? Why or why not? Well, if I want to get ahead, if I want to make sure that I can keep my job and I can continue to be in the government and be this elected official, then I probably will let the law pass because that's what's in my best interest. But then again, it's going to hurt a lot of people that were looking for me to represent them. So I guess honestly, if it were me, I would veto the law. I wouldn't let it pass because I would want the people that put me there and the people that I'm supposed to represent, the plebeians who don't have a lot of power, I would want them to be safe and to not be hurt, even though it means that I probably have to get a new job. That's what I would do. What would you do? Let me know in the comments or send me an email or a message. Building background. Building background. Government in Rome was often a balancing act. Like the politician above, leaders had to make compromises and risk the anger of other officials to keep people happy. To keep anyone from gaining too much power, the Roman government divided its power among many different officials. So here's where we're going to start to break down question 1 and question 4, the Roman government. When the plebeians complained about Rome's government in the 400 BCs, the city's leaders knew they had to do something. If the people stayed unhappy, they might rise up and overthrow the whole government. To calm the angry plebeians, the patricians made some changes to Rome's government. For example, they created new offices that could only be held by the plebeians. The people who held these offices protected the plebeians' rights and interests. Gradually, the distinctions between patricians and plebeians began to disappear, but that took a very long time. So remember, they started the government, this republic, in 509 BC, and now it's in the 400s. We're counting backwards to zero. So it's taken 100 years in order to start to get the common people to be able to participate in the government. So when they say that gradually the distinctions between patricians and plebeians began to disappear, but that took a very long time, they're talking generations. So a generation is about 20 to 25 years long. So you're talking 4 or 5 generations for things to happen. So as a result, the changes the patricians made, Rome developed a tripartite government, or a government with 3 parts. Tri means 3, like a triangle or a tricycle, or a tripartite government, a 3-part government. Each part had its own responsibilities and duties. To fulfill its duties, each part of the government had its own powers, rights, and privileges. The magistrates. So this is going to help with question 1 and 4. The first part of the Romans government was made up of elected officials, or magistrates. The 2 most powerful magistrates in Rome were called consuls. The consuls were elected each year to run the city and lead the army. There were 2 consuls so that not one person would be too powerful. So you have the first group are the magistrates, and of the magistrates, there are 2 that are above all the others, and they are called the consuls. And their job is to run the city, so they do all the daily decisions in Rome, and to lead the army. Below the consuls were the other magistrates. Rome had many different types of magistrates. Each was elected for 1 year and had his own duties and powers. Some were judges, others managed Rome's finances or organized games and festivities. So the magistrates ran the city and they were the judges. So that if somebody went to court and broke a law and they needed to figure out what to do, the judges would help them with that situation. All right, the next part of the tripartite government is the Senate. The second part of Rome's government was the Senate. The Roman Senate was a council of wealthy and powerful Romans that advised the city leaders, or they advised the magistrates. It was originally created to advise Rome's kings. After the kings were gone, the Senate continued to meet to advise the councils. So the Senate's job is to help the magistrates and the councils. Unlike the magistrates, senators, or members of the Senate, held office for life. By the time the Republic was created, the Senate had 300 members. At first, most senators were patricians, but as time passed, many wealthy plebeians became senators as well. Because magistrates became senators after completing their term of office, most didn't want to risk the anger of the Senate and risk their future jobs. As time passed, the Senate became more powerful. It gained influence over the magistrates and took control of the city's finances. By 200 BC, the Senate had great influence in Rome's government. So this helps with question 1C, what was the job of the Senate and how did they become more powerful? So if we go back to the reading, we can look and we can see that most senators were patricians, but as time passed, they became plebeians. So lots of wealthy people are in the Senate. And because magistrates became senators after completing their terms of office, most didn't want to make the Senate mad. So you have the magistrates, and they serve for 1 year. And when they're done serving, they go over and they become part of the Senate, and the Senate is there for life. So again, we started the Republic in 509. We're now in 400 BC, so 100 years went by, and we have more plebeians, more common people getting more responsibilities. Now by 200 BC, so another 200 years have gone by, 300 years from when the Republic started, now the Senate is very powerful. And it's powerful because it's controlling the money. They're controlling all the money. So the magistrates might be making the decisions, but they might say, we want to have a festival. And the Senate might go, nope, not going to give you any money to have a festival. So you can't do it, or you have to do it our way. You have to do what we want, or we won't give you any money for it. So that's how the Senate became very powerful. Now, there's going to be a little bit of a balance because we have 3 parts and we've just talked about 2. The magistrates, the Senate. This is the third part. And here's where it gets a little confusing because the third part has 2 branches. It has 2 parts. So there's really 4 parts to the government: the Senate, the magistrates, and then the third part is the assemblies and tribunes. So they work together, the assemblies and tribunes. The third part of Rome's government, the part that protected the common people, had 2 branches. The first branch was made up of the assemblies. Both patricians and plebeians took part in these assemblies. Their primary or first job was to elect the magistrates who ran the city of Rome, right? So the assembly's main job is to pick the magistrates, right? That's their main job. And because then those magistrates then become the senators. We're going to come back to this graphic in a second. The second branch is made up of a group of elected officials called the tribunes. Elected by the plebeians, tribunes had the ability to veto or prohibit actions by other officials. Veto means I forbid in Latin, the Romans' language. This veto power made tribunes very powerful in Rome's government. To keep them from abusing their power, each tribune remained in office for only 1 year. So even though the Senate, let me go to here. Okay, so even though the Senate has a lot of power because they control the money, the assembly is picking the magistrates, or the people who are going to make the decisions, and then they become the Senate. But the tribunes, they were only the common people. So you had to be a plebeian to be in this tribune group, and they could veto anybody's decision. So the council could say, we should go to war, and the tribunes could say, no, they don't go to war. The magistrates could say, we want to have this new tax, and the tribunes could say, no, and there's no new tax. The Senate could say, we think that no money should go to the magistrates, and the tribunes could say, no, and money has to go to the magistrates. So that made them very, very powerful. So this is a good graphic organizer to keep things straight when you're trying to figure out the power and what each group does. You have the magistrates, the Senate, and the Assembly and the tribunes. I know we're at about the 10-minute mark, and so I'm going to stop right here, and then we'll pick up with civic duty and checks and balances in the next video. Okay, so keep listening, but that's a little bit of the start of the government.